Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 24 team selection. But let's actually get started with the Game Week 23 team review since it was such an exciting double game week. Now, I got a lot of value in getting a green arrow. The reality is I did go for a very side grade move from White to Gabriel. Now, White was actually benched in the second fixture versus City, so that was actually something that did pique my interest. I didn't really expect that Arsenal would keep a clean sheet versus City because that was the game that I expected something from Brentford. And if I'm being completely honest, of course, White was very close to getting triple bonus points if, let's say, Arsenal were not potentially robbed, I guess, by a VAR decision. So this week could have gone much more horrendously when it comes to Gabriel versus White, but I'm quite happy I made that move because I do think from a tactical point of view, there are going to be weeks in the future where Tomiyasu will be called upon to play in the right back position. Although I think, of course, a lot of people are going to be looking at his mistake versus Kevin De Bruyne as a good example for why White might continue as a starting right back. But the reality is I think there is still the potential for rotation there. And still, of course, for Gabriel, we have to kind of bank in that sort of goal threat that hopefully we'll be able to rely upon later, as actually Gabriel and White are I think similar or the same on bonus points so far this season, with Saliba actually leading the way in terms of Arsenal defenders. Now, rest of the team, I think, of course, the big decision this week was actually a last minute decision sort of to drop Shaw to my bench, and that was simply because I thought that Leeds did extremely well versus Man United at Old Trafford, and I think they would once again be able to get a good result, potentially just score versus United. I didn't really think United would keep the clean sheets, and when I of course saw that the lineup come out with Maguire and Shaw, I was probably quite excited about Leeds and their chances to get a clean sheet. The reality is, of course, is that Leeds actually amassed an XG of something like 1.8 in that game, but we're still very unclinical, which is something that we've seen time and time again this season with Leeds, and maybe that was a wrong decision overall. I don't really regret it because I think just watching the United game, there were many chances for Leeds, and I was quite unlucky, I would say, to have missed out on 12 Shaw points. I think Shaw was definitely due something like 6 points because he was definitely deserving of an assist. So very similar to someone like Trent, for example, where, I mean, Trent got an assist taken away from him, but he had a 12-point ceiling, but probably wasn't as close to conceding outside of course, that sort of Tarkowski header chance that preceded Mo Salah's goal. I think the way things stand is that Liverpool were able to grind out a result versus Everton, and it looks positive in the sense that for Game Week 25, when I'm going to be calling upon Trent, it seems like I will be able to rely on him. And it doesn't seem like this Liverpool team are going to be continuously horrid week on week, as they are still capable of putting on some decent performances. I also just simply like the fact that Trent was quite an attacking player, and they did settle in when they had a 2-0 lead to actually park. So that was quite good to see from this Liverpool team, some sort of positive sign to actually see them get a clean sheet once in a while. As far as the rest of the team, of course, De Bruyne, very excited to actually get his points there because it seemed like it was going to be a calamitous decision to actually keep De Bruyne all this time. And now it seems quite good that I've gone from Martinelli to Fernandes and then actually keeping De Bruyne without having to transfer him back in. And even though Odegaard actually blanked this week, it's quite useful to have Odegaard, in my opinion, for 25 and going forwards, because I don't really need to replace someone like Nketiah, who, even though he probably had better chances than Odegaard, well, all things considered, he probably has to go sometime in the future because of Jesus coming back into the team. And with De Bruyne, of course, him getting 15 points this week was essential because that chance was what basically got me a green arrow this week, a very slim green arrow, arguably a gray arrow, because I'm pretty much at the same rank as I was in the previous week. As far as Gabriel, it's nice to also get a green arrow whilst taking a -4, even though I didn't get any net benefits there. So I've already discussed that in terms of, I'm just happy longer term going with Gabriel going forwards over White, and I'm happy I made that decision. Maybe it's the wrong decision, but at least I've made it, and this is the week where I would have suffered for it, and it's nice to know that I didn't suffer too much. As far as Rashford, of course, he's just so consistent where it's so hard to take him out of your team, and I think the same thing goes with Shaw, where clearly it was a mistake for me to take him out because he's still so electric on the attacking end, regardless of what United's defense could look like on a week-to-week basis, regardless of who they bench and what their priorities are when it comes to the difference between Europa League and the Premier League. It just makes sense to actually keep players like Shaw and Rashford for the United team, and then I have Trippier as well, who's got a blank in Game Week 25. Now, the idea, of course, is still to go to Mitoma in Game Week 26, and I think that plan is still thoroughly in place. Maybe I might also consider McAllister after watching how McAllister performs and what sort of position he takes in Fulham, because it seems like he could be playing in this sort of 10 spot, which I think was very exciting for the previous game that Brighton had played. McAllister had plenty of chances, so that's going to be something to look at, whether my transfer actually becomes McAllister as opposed to Mitoma, and we'll obviously stay tuned with that, and I'll kind of update you guys through my cheat sheet as well next week, where I have an update after getting a little bit more data from Brighton, also just the eye test going forwards. Andreas was also someone that I think, as I said, the decision to actually bench Shaw was to simply play him, and it was nice to see that he actually got an assist. I think it was quite a high ceiling game in a sense for someone like Andreas because he's playing versus Nottingham Forest. I didn't think Nottingham Forest's defense looked very good. It was nice to see him actually get an assist in open play, nothing kind of janky about it. It was a deserved assist. Now, of course, I'm 6 points down versus Shaw from both Trent and Andreas, but all things considered, the logic was sound, and that's something that I can rely upon. But the reality is, of course, Shaw is just a deadly asset, so something to say there. As far as going forwards, I think structurally, I don't really like Mitrovic too much. It seems like, of course, he's tapered off when it comes to form. I think we can also say that simply he's not a great penalty taker. So when you, let's say, look at the NPXG statistics, which is basically a non-penalty expected goals, he doesn't look as if he's flying above the rest of the league. So therefore, a move away from Mitrovic, especially to someone like Darwin, if I roll the transfer this week, will be quite beneficial for Game Week 24, meaning that I can go for Darwin Game Week 25 whilst also probably going from Kevin De Bruyne to Salah. So that's going to be an option there to go triple Liverpool, now that it seems like we have a little bit of confidence restored in them. But the reality is, it's just they have a double game week, and they have a really good double game week as well. So I don't really regret the fact that they have to play United next, because it seems like I can just simply get Mitoma into my team, potentially even bench Trent versus United, and I still have a relatively strong team to actually fire out in Game Week 25 and 26. So that's my rough plan so far. But let's actually have a look at my team for Game Week 24 and see how I've set up my team out. The way I've done it, of course, is I've gone for Shaw, Trippier, and Gabriel, and that means that Trent has been relegated to the bench. My expectations, that I think, based on, first of all, watching the Liverpool and Newcastle game earlier this season, but also just looking at both these two teams lately, we actually have seen that Newcastle have struggled from the defensive point of view. We have seen that they've actually given away much more XG to their opponents, and that does probably mean that the defense is declining. But I still think that this Liverpool team will probably struggle versus Newcastle. Newcastle is no joke when it comes to the offensive point of view. I think their offensive numbers are still really good. So when it comes down to it, it's who do I actually think is probably more likely to keep a clean sheet? A Liverpool team that just came off a clean sheet versus Everton, but have actually otherwise shown some really poor performances, or a slowly declining Newcastle team heading into a sea of tough fixtures? I still think I'm going to rely upon Newcastle this week, so therefore I'm going to make that decision where I'm going for Trippier over Trent, and then I'm going to play Shaw and Gabriel. Shaw, for the reasons that I explained, very attacking player, probably still a little bit of higher chance of keeping a clean sheet than either Trippier or Trent. And then with Gabriel, happy to go with him going forwards. I think Aston Villa didn't really show much of a threat versus City. Yes, of course, he did score in the second half, but I think that was one of those situations where you can always see that City drops off when they have such a huge lead at 3-0, and then you've got halftime changes as well. So that's going to change the team dynamic. And so I think that's something to think about. And as far as the midfield, Saka, Rashford, De Bruyne, and Odegaard will continue to play for me, and Andreas will be relegated to the bench. And the reason simply is because I do think Brighton's actually been a very, very solid team. Maybe not the best defensively, but still Brighton have actually been showing some really good defensive numbers. They were quite unfortunate, I would say, due to a personal mistake from Robert Sanchez to actually have conceded versus Crystal Palace. Otherwise, they probably would have kept another clean sheet, which would have been a back-to-back for Brighton. So that's quite a positive sign. I think Andreas, yes, the ceiling is probably, when I still choose between, let's say, Mitrovic and Andreas, I think I'm still probably going to pick Mitrovic every week. So if I'm going to pick one of the two, it's going to be Mitrovic first, and therefore Andreas goes to the bench. And for the rest of my team, of course, very happy to play Saka and Odegaard. They did look relatively good versus City. I think Saka, of course, missed a key chance that actually Odegaard had been able to slip through to the right foot of Saka, but we know Saka's left-footed, so he didn't take that opportunity. He took it back on his left and actually basically wasted a very great chance, I would say, to actually shoot versus Ederson in that first half. But otherwise, of course, he scored a penalty, which was something that is why we've owned someone like Saka all this time. He's a penalty taker, so that's always going to provide you some value. You know, you don't know exactly when, but that value is always going to be there. As far as Rashford and De Bruyne's an interesting one, because I think maybe if De Bruyne didn't have such an exhilarating performance versus Arsenal, I would have been super tempted to actually go De Bruyne to Salah, because of course Salah will be nailed to actually play that game versus Newcastle, even though it's a very tough Newcastle defense. The reality is De Bruyne probably has a quite high chance of being rotated and rested versus Nottingham Forest, but I think him actually coming off a little bit earlier versus Arsenal gives me a little bit of a glimmer of hope that he actually can play in this Nottingham Forest game, actually start, maybe get in a kind of very good 60-minute performance before he actually gets rested for the Champions League game. That's my kind of hope and my intent. Trent. I think De Bruyne did have a relatively good game versus Arsenal, all things being considered. The reality is City didn't actually get much possession today, so De Bruyne, of course, didn't have as many chances to, let's say, slip in someone like Haaland in behind, but he still found a great opportunity to do so, as he did when he found the assist for Haaland in the second half in the Arsenal game. So that's quite interesting. I think De Bruyne is someone who actually has to stay, and against my actual initial opinions of this week, that I don't think I'm going to make that De Bruyne to Salah transfer. And rolling, of course, is positive because you actually get more information for the next week to make the accurate or correct decision, at least, or the best guess. For example, when we're closer to Game Week 25 and that deadline there, when we're trying to capitalize around those doubles. And maybe I'll also get some more updated information on someone like Patterson, whether Patterson is actually able to play, whether he's able to displace Coleman in this Everton team now that he's back in training. And we'll see what happens, of course, with Patterson maybe getting a chance to play a few minutes versus Leeds, and maybe I could throw him in there in my team in Game Week 25. As far as Rashford, I mean, he's just in some incredible form, so there's no reason to really touch him. I think he's going to be a season keeper, the way things are really shaping up for Rashford. And if we move towards the forwards, just to round things out, captaincy is going to be smashed on Haaland, vice captaincy on Rashford. Look, I think Haaland is someone that is probably still going to be chasing that kind of Premier League goal scoring record. And I think, of course, we've heard Pep speak many times before that he's a young kid. We all know he can score in 45-60 minutes, and that's probably what's going to happen, where he's going to start versus Nottingham Forest and hopefully get a good result there. Now, there could be, of course, a chance that Julian Alvarez is going to be subbed on, but I'm not going to take that chance, or that Julian Alvarez starts over Haaland. I just don't really see that opportunity. So that's going to be just a very simple Haaland captaincy. I think you could obviously go outside of that, maybe bank on a Rashford captaincy this week if you want to be a little bit more differential, but I wouldn't really advise for it. I still think this is a very, very good Haaland captaincy. And as I've been saying, Nottingham Forest defense really don't scare me. So Gnonto and Mitrovic, that's probably going to be the more controversial decisions in my team. Mitrovic, of course, has been blanking for the last few weeks. And the reality is I still think his expected goal numbers are very good. And this Fulham team is still consistently built around trying to support him in his goal scoring attempts. So I like that point of view, where Mitrovic for me is still the talisman of that team, and they're still trying to work chances across towards him. You could say maybe he's out of form. The reality is he's still someone that I can't see myself going out of this week. I could obviously go to João Felix this week. It would be quite interesting, but that would also make me lose out on someone like Darwin, who's got a double game week in Game Week 25, and that kind of closes that option. So yes, whilst Mitrovic to João Felix is on the cards for Game Week 24, I'm going to just sidestep that transfer, and I think I'll just wait for that Darwin train when it's available for me. And then with Gnonto and Everton, the reason why I'm going for this move here is, look, there's a high chance that Patterson probably doesn't get that start versus someone like Gnonto versus Leeds, but Gnonto has been absolutely terrorizing most of the right backs in the league, and Coleman, to be honest, just doesn't really seem like he's actually capable of matching towards the standard of the Prem. We saw him leave someone like Gakpo quite open. Of course, there was a deflection there, but overall, I really feel like we've seen a lot of mistakes from Coleman, even with the Sean Dyche era coming in and them supposedly looking much more compact, I would say, versus Arsenal, but then once again looking very calamitous versus Liverpool. So the way things look with Leeds still looking very, very strong on attack, and even though they don't have a permanent manager in place, I'm still quite confident to go with Gnonto. I think there's a bit more upside there than chasing, let's say, a clean sheet and trying to guess correctly between Trippier and Trent in that game. I'm just going to imagine that it's going to be quite a kind of a sort of 1-1 game in that sort of Liverpool-Newcastle situation, hoping that Gnonto can actually get something across versus Everton, who honestly did not look very good versus Liverpool. And that's pretty much the main reason why I've swerved towards moving Gnonto into my team, going for a 3-4-3 setup this week and trying to take advantage of one of my differentials here, whilst also putting one of my differentials on the bench, that being Trent. I think in reality, Trippier, Gnonto, Trent, these are all three assets that I think are very, very close when it comes to the actual value that they provide for Game Week 24. So there's going to be a very tough benching decision there. I might change my opinion once again, hopefully for the better, unlike last week. And that's going to be my team selection for this week. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.